Mark Reynolds never had much patience for bureaucrats, especially the self-important kind who ran homeowners associations like personal fiefdoms. He had moved into the Willow Creek community 5 years ago, more for its convenient location than its so-called amenities. As the owner of Reynolds Auto Repair, he was too busy running his business to bother with neighborhood politics until the HOA made the mistake of interfering with his livelihood. It started with a problem Mark didn't immediately notice. His auto shop sat on a commercial lot just outside the gated community, separated from the neighborhood by a low brick wall and a row of shrubs. The lot wasn't huge, but it was enough for his employees, customers, and the occasional overnight storage of vehicles awaiting parts. It was private property, clearly marked with signs stating as much. Yet one Monday morning, he arrived to find his lot nearly full of cars he didn't recognize. He frowned as he pulled into his usual spot. His employees, already gathered near the shop's entrance, were murmuring among themselves. "Morning, boss," said Rick, his longest-serving mechanic. He gestured toward the field lot. "You see this mess? These cars ain't ours." Mark climbed out his truck and surveyed the scene. At least a dozen vehicles had been parked in spaces clearly designated for customers. A few had HOA parking stickers in their windshields. His stomach tightened with a familiar sense of irritation. He had seen those stickers before, mostly on the pristine SUVs and sedans belonging to Willow Creek's more entitled residents. "I'll handle it," Mark muttered, marching toward the nearest house in the neighborhood, a well-manicured property just beyond the hedge. A middle-aged man watering his azaleas looked up as Mark approached. "Hey, you the HOA?" the man asked. Mark scowled. "No, I own the auto shop next door. Do you know why half the neighborhood is parked in my lot?" The man's expression shifted into something between amusement and smugness. "Oh, that? The HOA made a decision last week. They said your lot was the best overflow parking option for residents. They even sent out a notice." Mark's fists clenched at his sides. "A notice? I didn't get one." The man shrugged. "Not my problem. Diane said it was fine." Diane Harrington. The name alone was enough to set Mark's blood boiling. The HOA president was notorious for her domineering attitude and her ability to twist community rules to suit her preferences. More than once, Mark had heard horror stories of her bullying neighbors into compliance, whether they liked it or not. Mark didn't waste another second talking. He turned and stormed toward his truck, barely restraining himself from slamming the door as he climbed in. If Diane wanted a confrontation, she was going to get one. By the time he arrived at the community center, a weekly HOA meeting was already underway. He strode in, interrupting a discussion about fence heights. "Diane," he said, his voice clipped, "we need to talk. Now." Diane, a slender woman in an expensive blazer, barely spared him a glance. "Mark, dear, you'll have to wait your turn." "To hell with that," Mark snapped. "Who gave you the right to let your residents park on my property?" Murmurs spread through the room. Diane, ever composed, clasped her hands together. "Mark, please lower your voice. There's no need for hostility. The hell there isn't. My lot is private property." Diane sighed dramatically, as if dealing with an unruly child. "We voted on it. Our community has limited guest parking, and since your business isn't open all night, we thought it was a reasonable solution." Mark leaned forward, his voice dangerously low. "That's theft, Diane. You're trespassing." "Oh, come now," she said with a patronizing smile. "We assumed you'd be a good neighbor. This benefits everyone." "No, it benefits you," Mark shot back. "Not me, not my business. If you wanted to use my lot, you should have asked." Diane tilted her head. "And if I had, I'd have told you no." A few attendees shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The tension in the room thickened. Diane's smile faltered for half a second before she recovered. "Well, what's done is done. We'll discuss terms if you insist, but this is the best solution for the community." Mark exhaled slowly. He could already see that reasoning with her was pointless. She had the smug assurance of someone who thought herself untouchable. But she was wrong. He forced a tight smile. "Fine," he said. "If that's how you want to handle things, so be it." He turned on his heel and walked out, already formulating his next move. Diane thought she could take advantage of him, that he would roll over like some pushover neighbor afraid of HOA retaliation. She was about to learn how very wrong she was. Mark wasted no time. The moment he returned to his office, he dug through every legal document related to his property. His commercial lot was fully owned, free and clear. There was no easement, no agreement, and certainly no legal precedent giving the HOA any claim over it. He placed a call to his lawyer, Bruce Halloway, a no-nonsense man with a reputation for dismantling weak legal arguments. After explaining the situation, Bruce let out a dry chuckle. "They're bluffing," Bruce said. "HOAs love to push people around with fake authority. If they had any real legal grounds, they have presented you with documents." "That's what I figured," Mark replied. "So what are my options?" Bruce hummed thoughtfully. "Well, first, you need to establish that you're not allowing this. Put up clear no parking signs. Then, send a cease and desist letter to the HOA. If they ignore it, you're well within your rights to have the vehicles towed." A slow grin spread across Mark's face. "That's exactly what I'll do." That night, he and his employees installed freshly printed signs around the lot, each one stating in bold, capital letters, "Private property. Unauthorized vehicles will be towed at owner's expense." The next morning, he sent the cease and desist letter via certified mail, ensuring Diane couldn't claim ignorance. Then he waited, and, predictably, she ignored it. The following weekend, Mark took the final step. He made a few calls to local towing companies, arranging for a coordinated effort. As night fell, tow trucks began rolling in, their hooks and chains gleaming under the streetlights. One by one, every unauthorized car was hauled away. By the time the sun rose, his lot was empty, except for a massive banner strung across the entrance. "Trespassers will be towed. No exceptions." The storm was coming, and Mark was more than ready to face it. The morning after the mass towing operation, chaos erupted in Willow Creek. Mark arrived at his shop to find a group of furious homeowners gathered near his lot, their voices rising in heated arguments. "Where's my car?" a woman shrieked, waving her phone at him like a weapon. "This is theft," another man yelled. "You had no right to tow us." Mark folded his arms across his chest, his expression calm, despite the fury around him. "Actually," he said coolly, "I had every right. You were trespassing on private property." Diane Harrington herself arrived moments later, her face an ugly shade of red. She marched up to him, her designer heels clicking against the pavement. "You had no authority to do this," she spat. Mark raised an eyebrow. "And you had no authority to turn my lot into your personal parking garage." Diane scoffed. "We had an agreement." "No, you made an assumption. And you ignored the cease and desist letter I sent you. That's on you, not me." "You're going to pay for this," Diane sneered. "The HOA has legal representation. I'll see to it that—" "Good," Mark interrupted, "because my lawyer is already drafting a lawsuit for unauthorized use of my property." Diane's confidence wavered for the first time. "You wouldn't." Mark smirked. "Oh, I absolutely would. And since I have security footage proving everything, I'm guessing the judge will side with me." The crowd's anger slowly shifted away from Mark and toward Diane. A few residents muttered among themselves, realizing they'd been duped into believing Diane had arranged this legally. "So what now?" a man asked hesitantly. "Well," Mark said, enjoying the moment, "you can go down to Carter's Towing and pay the release fees. I hear they're charging a premium, since it was an HOA-wide violation." The sheer horror on their faces almost made the ordeal worth it, as residents begrudgingly began calling tow yards to retrieve their vehicles. Diane remained frozen in place, seething. But Mark had one final move to ensure she never pulled a stunt like this again. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a printed notice. "Oh, by the way, I'm also officially banning all HOA members from using my property. Any vehicle I see parked here, towed instantly." He smirked. "No exceptions." Diane's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. She had lost, and she knew it. For the next few weeks, Diane Harrington did everything she could to regain control of the situation. She called emergency HOA meetings, sent out desperate emails, and even attempted to push a new community rule stating that Mark's lot was subject to HOA jurisdiction. It was laughable. Mark's lawyer, Bruce Holloway, fired back with a formal lawsuit against the HOA for illegal use of private property. With the security footage, cease and desist letter, and eyewitness accounts, the case was a slam dunk. Diane had no choice but to back down, but not before the HOA was forced to settle with Mark. The settlement was a thing of beauty. Not only did the HOA have to issue a public apology, but they were also forced to pay for every single towing fee incurred by the residents. Diane, humiliated and facing outrage from homeowners, resigned from her position. The HOA board, now under new leadership, scrambled to clean up the mess she had created. But Mark wasn't done. With the lawsuit settled in his favor, he made one final move. He installed an iron gate at the entrance of his lot, complete with keypad access for his employees and customers only. The message was clear: no HOA interference. Ever again. The next time Mark drove past a neighborhood, he noticed a new HOA president, a man who actually understood boundaries, waving at him politely. Mark smirked. Peace at last. And the HOA had finally learned its lesson.